happy to know that Lalit Verma and Shahnaz, between them, through Aurodhan, are organizing a multiple festival in Pondicherry again, with poets and thinkers and writers and artists. This gallery has always done a lot of useful work in Pondicherry, and they're doing it again. I'm sorry I won't be there, but I send you my very warm greetings for the success of this. I would have loved to have met all those artists and poets and thinkers and photographers, but I'll have to just confine myself to reciting one poem. Lalit wants me to recite one poem, and I have chosen a poem by Sri Aurobindo called Who. Now, here is a poem. It's called WHO Who. In the blue of the sky and the green of the forests, whose is the hand that has painted the glow? When the winds were asleep in the womb of the ether, who was it roused them and bade them to blow? He is lost in the heart in the cavern of nature. He is found in the brain where he builds up the thought. In the pattern and bloom of the flowers he is woven. In the luminous net of the stars he is caught. In the strength of a man, in the beauty of woman, in the laugh of a boy, in the blush of a girl, the hand that's in Jupiter spinning through heaven spends all its cunning to fashion a girl. These are his works and his ways and his shadows. But where is he then? By what name is he known? Is he Brahma or Vishnu, a man or a woman, bodied or bodiless, twin or alone? We have love for a boy who is dark and resplendent. A woman is lord of us, naked and fierce. We've seen him amuse on the snows of the mountain. We've watched him at work in the heart of the spheres. We will tell the whole world of his ways and his cunning, his rapture of torture and passion and pain. He delights in our sorrow and drives us to weeping, then rears with his joy and his beauty again. All music is only the sound of his laughter. All beauty the smile of his passionate bliss. Our lives are his heartbeats. Our rapture the bridal of Radha and Krishna. Our love is their kiss. His strength that is loud in the blare of the trumpets. And he rides in the car and he strikes in the spears. He slays without stint and is full of compassion. He wars for the world and his ultimate years. In the sweep of the worlds, in the surge of the ages, ineffable, mighty, majestic and pure, beyond the last pinnacle seized by the thinker, he is thrown in his seat.
Good morning, everybody. It's such a pleasure to have this Pondicherry Literatures and Art Festival dedicated to my Guru, Sri Aurobindo and the Mother. We will be having the whole day filled with great thinkers, poets, philosophers, artists, dancers and musicians. So we will have a continuous but very easy flow. Aurodhan Art Gallery along with Sudip Sen, well, please come here. We decided that let us do something after the COVID which would unite people, and that is why we called the festival Towards the Essence. In today's world, we are so much away from the essence and strive and live and build perceptions on things which are artificial. So if you can go a little bit towards the essence, that was our motive. And so we have decided to cover various topics, including emotion, because the emotions also are going haywire with the condition of the world. So I hope that this festival will inspire and also bring the consciousness higher as we dedicate this to all of you. And of course there are a lot of people watching. You are all welcome for all the events. And before I invite Dr. Aurodhan, I want to really thank you for coming. I would ask you to say a few words. And after that, of course, Anand Bhai, again, thank you so much for taking up the topic after Aurodhan.
Namaskar, good morning. It's been a real treat to put it together actually. It's a wonderful combination of me looking after the arts and my responsibility was getting literature on board. It was done very spontaneously, very quickly, so we sought our the help of our friends and colleagues, fellow artists. Yesterday we had this magical opening where Shashank and some of the musicians who do 2-3 hour concerts in their own right, they all came to play for 10 minutes. There was this beautiful sound healing which just laid the atmosphere in a kind of soulful way, invoking Sri Aurobindo and Ma. I linked to the spaces. My grandmother used to be a devotee of Aurobindo, so as a child I've been here as a pilgrim. And I said this yesterday, my memory, if it doesn't fail me badly, I remember the street names used to be in French and Bangla. Now the second language has changed in the street name. But welcome, it's more a space to heal, to show gratitude and love, and you have a wonderful set of writers and musicians and artists following. Thank you for coming. The program's out here, and enjoy.
I'll request Mahesh to come into a small invocation. After the invocation, all of like we start.
Shruti Smriti Puranam Shruti Smriti Puranam Adayam Karunadayam Shruti Smriti Puranam Adayam Karunadayam Namah Bhagavapada Shankaram Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Paninendukum Tayinum Salat Parindiki Paninendukum Tayinum Salat Parindiki ஊடினை முறுக்கி உள்ளொளிபெருக்கி குலப்பிலானந்தமாய ஏனினை சொரிந்து புறம் புறம் திரிந்த என் செல்வமே செல்வமே சிவபெருமானே செல்வமே சிவபெருமானே யானை தொடர்ந்து 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 சிக்கன பிடித்து எங்களும் தருவது சிவ சிவயன வயமசி நம சிவ நம சிவய Masivaya Hari Om Shivaya.
Dr. Aurodhan, Aurodhan, welcome. I'm going to give you a few lines introduction. Aurodhan, he is now very well renowned all over the world to talk on Mother and Aurodhan's works. It's a great pleasure to have you. Thank you.
Namaste. So, there are several ways of invoking Sri Aurobindo, in whose memory we are holding these sessions. But the one that came to me this morning was a verse from the Kena Upanishad. Yad vachan abhyutam yena vagabhyutate tadev brahman tvam vidhi nedam yadidam upasate. That which the speech cannot reach, but that from which the speech itself is born. He is the speech of our speech, of all speech. For does he not embody and bring to earth the creative word from the higher hemisphere? There are several ways of approaching Sri Aurobindo's poems, but one that comes dear to my heart is his life through his poems. He did say that no one can write about my life, for it has not been on the surface for men to see. Yet out of infinite compassion and grace, he did reveal few star scripts from his life so that we can bathe in its glory and joy and be uplifted and transformed, because the word that he releases is not just a word, it's a creative power. That's how the Upanishad puts it. The word has power, it is a creative power. That's how the rishis used it. So it was not just a word which makes us feel good, not just a word which we understand by the mind, but it creates the states of consciousness which the seer embodies and has experienced. This is something so amazing. It even impacts the material substance. All this is all Sri Aurobindo Mother has spoken about it in the Kena Upanishad, which I am referring to it. Sri Aurobindo notes it, that it has the power to create the states of consciousness which the seer embodies. So it's not just a bridge thrown between him and us, because for him there are no us, only him alone, in which all of us are there. But this power to transmit an experience through the agency of the word. Of course, Sri Aurobindo has done it silently, because he says there are two ways of this, two powers of this word in our lower hemisphere. There are 4 levels at which it manifests: the Paravak and the Pashyanti Vak, and the Madhyama and the Vaikhari. So Vaikhari is the outer spoken word, and Madhyama is when still in the silence, in the thought, and that is a greater power. So these are the levels, and he has brought it down, the word of the new creation, if I may say so. And one of the best ways to read his biography is through Sri Aurobindo's poem. Of course, Savitri is there, that's ultimate. And then, of course, as he said, my most important work. And then, of course, there are his poems. And in one of the poems, where he reveals one facet of his life, countless experiences, but one poem where he reveals one facet, where he has written down all these beautiful things for all of us to read, and not just to adorn the libraries. So that poem is Seer Deep-Hearted. Seer Deep-Hearted, divine king of secrecies, occult fountain of love sprung from the heart of God. Words leaped flashing, flame billows of wisdom's seas. Vast in thy soul was a tide washing the coasts of heaven. I am following the SABCL version, not the CWSC, because I find the rhythm much better. Vast in thy soul was a tide washing the coasts of heaven. White starred scripts of the gods born from the presses of light. Otherwise, book of light. Born from the presses of light. He has squeezed out the essence which I was speaking about and given it to us. White starred scripts of the gods born from the presses of light. Crossing the human night. They are crossing the human night. White starred scripts of the God, crossing of the human night, born from the presses of light, page by page, to the dim children of earth were given. This is tremendous compassion and grace. Literally, Sri Aurobindo, if I may say so outwardly, lost his vision while giving us the supreme vision. This is something so amazing. And the least we can do is to at least read something of these books. He lost his outer vision to give us the inner vision. And the minimum is the way we can express gratitude and homage. While we do many things, celebrations all is wonderful, but at least read. to come in contact. It's a bridge he himself has thrown. All that is required is to read it. So this word that Sri Aurobindo brings is not just another poetry. Poetry, of course, he speaks of what is poetry. He has taken human speech to its highest intensity. And there is a very interesting aside to it. If we look at this world, material world, it's a creation starting from that first vibration, stir, nad, in ether. Goes down and down and down, down, till it becomes matter, this material world. And scientists speak about it, that the word can create and the word can destroy. See, that's why it is so useful to be careful about what we speak. Not only speak, what we think. As a doctor, I am aware, I have seen a patient who was, in a state of semi-unconsciousness, and we were taking around, and this head doctor just passingly said, iska kuch nahi ho sakta. Nothing can happen, much be done about him. He was, of course, an alcoholic, but see, when we condemn people, we don't know that there is grace. So, iska kuch nahi ho sakta. And as we moved, suddenly this man came alive. He sat bolt straight and said, Doctor, aisa mat kaho. It's in front of my eyes, and collapsed, and he died. The impact of that word was so strong that the doctor precipitated something which may have taken place, who knows when, what. So the word has a power to slay and to create. So one has to be so careful, as you were saying, to bring together, to unite. And the word is often used to divide. So this power of the word to create, Sri Aurobindo has taken it to its utmost possibility. But for that, how does it create? By these vibrations, by the rhythms. So it has two things, as we know, the sound and the word itself. Sound itself is a creative agency. And because this nad is the first to come down into this creation, it is also the last in terms of its recovery. So, one of the highest attributes that marks a human being, I believe, is thought and speech. Is that which marks. Sound is there even in animals, very beautiful sounds. But speech is something which comes at the end. That's why in the Kena Upanishad we see that it starts with speech. And Sri Aurobindo explains it. Why it is the speech which he mentions first. And all yan manasana manute, and then chakshu, richakshu, and hearing all comes later. Speech is the power which is given to us to embody that creative word. But how are we to embody unless we ascend? And for that ascension, he has given us this wonderful, his works, to not just to think, meditate, reflect upon, just to read. And just reading them evokes those states. I have seen this. Mother has, of course, written this, and all of us, I'm sure, have experienced this. Whenever one is in a state of depression, just pick up Savitri. Actually, any work. Pick up Savitri and just read randomly any page. I wish I could prescribe it officially. Instead of other things, read Savitri. Only thing is that I'll be scandalized. And they'll say, I think room mein better hai. Medical yahan likh ke. Don't sit in the dispensary. But this is what it should be. Just reading it is magical. Actually, anybody who has really done it knows it. And the other day, I must say that since I'm at it, of course, Anand Bhai is the expert of experts in life divine. And I was just going through these talks on the life divine. I had to give a series of talks. So, long time I had read it once, twice, beautiful, but I was reading it again. And I must share this experience that several times I was aware of Sri Aurobindo in his vast body sitting right over the head. And the immense change that was coming, I said, oh, this is the life divine. So these works of Sri Aurobindo, they are... So when we read it in a state of receptive quietude, not only it can uplift depression, that's a very small thing after all. Depression is nothing but consciousness concentrated upon oneself. I, what happened to me, what didn't happen to me, who said this to me, who didn't say this to me, did somebody greet me, did somebody not greet me, did somebody look at me, this is all me. But what a work like Savitri does, it just changes one little letter. Instead of me, it makes it ma. Ma, look at me. There also ma, that's it. It immediately creates a connect. But this is one of the smallest of effects. I mean, it's considerable given the stress in which we live our lives. But what is magical is, not only does it make our depression vanish, but it changes it into something which is joyful, and sometimes can be so paradoxical that I am supposed to be depressed, I am supposed to be unhappy, but I am feeling a joy. Why? So it gives that power within us to create a state which corresponds to what we are reading. And that is something so magical, so beautiful. And the mother goes on to say, it not only creates a state, she says it actually works upon the brain cells. It creates whatever is necessary to understand. So very often I share this little thing when people say, I can't understand Sri Aurobindo. What should I do? So my suggestion is read Sri Aurobindo. But I can't understand Sri Aurobindo. Read Sri Aurobindo more and more. I can't understand Sri Aurobindo. Read Sri Aurobindo. Why? Because it is he who will create, when we read it, read him, he creates the brain cells needed for the understanding. This word has the power to readjust our inner imbalances and disorders and everything. I mean, I'm sure many have experienced, but it's something which I have completely experienced very personally. Once going through a very severe dehydration, dysentery, almost collapsed, actually collapsed while coming out of the lift. Kavita was with me and we were taken to, I was admitted in Command Hospital, Bangalore. I was with the Air Force. And a friend of mine came, now he is a neonatologist, and he said, Alok bhai, you want something? Very feeble I said, please read Baji Prabhu. Baji Prabhu. So while drip was going on, I don't even recollect how I was taken in the ambulance, drip was given and I was admitted to officer's ICU, and as he was reading Baji Prabhu, within few minutes, halfway through I was sitting, smiling, enjoying, waiting for my breakfast, and he said, what magic is this? I said, this is the magic in this. It's not all the rasas, people try to see that there are rasas in Sri Aurobindo's poetry. I personally feel that all rasas are born from he who is the supreme rasa of all. Raso Vaisaha, as the same Upanishad declares. And this is the embodiment of the supreme ras who has become all these 9 or as they say 10 rasas. He is that rasa of all rasas. Just as he is the speech of all speech, he is the rasa, the core, the essence of even the essence. The soul of our soul, if I may say so. The supreme soul. So this is one of the most beautiful things and great opportunity and privilege for us as a children and all over the world to connect. And one thing which is very beautiful, which is happening in this particular year, people were asking that what all is happening and is there a change and all. So 50 years back, exactly 50 years back, 16th February 1972 to be precise, the year of Sri Aurobindo's centenary, the mother made a prophetic statement. She said, in 50 years, the whole world, and then she modified it slightly, in brackets she puts it, I mean the receptive section of humanity, not just the intellectual. The whole world will be absorbed, the receptive section will be absorbed in Sri Aurobindo's thought. Something which one can see happening in the last, during this 150th year celebration. Often people ask that what are the changes that are happening? So I say, look here, this is where the seed of the change is and people are really catching it. Outer changes are the last to manifest. But if the world can really awaken to what a treasure, priceless treasure that Sri Aurobindo and the mother have given, this is the core of all the things to be. A word is spoken, a light is shown. This was the seed of all the things to be. A word is spoken, the century is toiled to express. This is the beauty that Sri Aurobindo brings us. I know there are a lot of things in the line. Let me read a passage from Sri Aurobindo's Savitri. So, the power of the mantra is the highest intensity of speech. The ultimate, many things Sri Aurobindo has evolved. When the divine touches anything, he transmutes it. So, like the story of Kubja being transmuted into a beautiful woman by the touch of Krishna, or the Shila, Gautam Narya Hilyathari, transmuting into a beautiful maiden, or the trees which Sri Krishna liberates, or the Kansa, him too he gave a clasp and freed him from his asuric pravartis, took him straight to. So whatever he touches, he transmutes. So we see Sri Aurobindo transmuting every sphere of life. And he transmuted, one of the things he transmuted is English language. This was his way of returning back. You see, when Britishers took away many things from India, looted, and while this lutera was going on, they also looted, perchance, a copy of the Bhagavad Gita. That's how the Bhagavad Gita reaches the other shore. And look at now. It is this which went. Sri Krishna said, okay, an incognito of the imperishable, I'll go there, hidden. And he has started changing. World is taking interest in Bhagavad Gita. So, of course, he was educated in, he didn't know his mother tongue, he was educated in, Cambridge and subsequently. So, how has he to return back? See, the divine must give back. Kansa had made him a captive, so he returned the clasp and liberated. So, how did he give back? He has transmuted English language into what heights? I have seen words used by Sri Aurobindo, and I'm sure all of us have seen, this is no need to tell anyone, which are generally used in a strangely either a negative or a kind of wishy-washy sense. But he has taken it to a height which only he could do. Several times in Savitri I have seen such passages. One which comes immediately to my mind is, he describes the divine as loitering in nature's instruments, loiters, secret God. Now just imagine, loiters. Normally when we were children, our parents, don't loiter. My father would say, don't loiter around. Avara girdi. That's what in Hindi he would say, avara girdi. Can we imagine Sri Aurobindo using loiters to this degree? Loiters, secret God. And look what he conveys. No other word can convey it. He is loitering around as if he is doing nothing, and yet he is doing something, and he is doing everything. So there are many, many places, many such instances in Savitri. It's a subject of study in its own right, where he has used a most commonplace word and lifted it to heights. He lifted English to what heights? I remember when somebody asked V.K. Gokak that, does Sri Aurobindo's English, something he wanted to comment on Sri Aurobindo's English, comma, full stop, all that. And he gave a very powerful reply. He said, it's not English that Sri Aurobindo speaks. What Sri Aurobindo speaks is English. That is the power of the Lord, touching things and transmuting it. Poetry. I mean, when you read a book like, it's a book actually, Ilion, I wish, the rest of the pages were found, they were lost. It flows like Ganges. You feel you are taking a dip in the Ganges. At least I have this feeling. The lilting melody of Ahana and Ilion, mesmerizing, and the image it creates. The only other thing I remember is reading the Mahabharata. And when I was reading, I was so absorbed. It was like war going on in front of me. And I used to wonder that, could anybody ever write like this? But when I read the Ilion, I was not in front of me, I was in the middle of it. When you read the Bachi Prabhu, every bit of it, even the smallest detail, no picture can capture it. He describes at one place that, Baji, toward the end, he is being slashed, and even his fingers are being, affected, and he rubs the blood over his forehead, and then all Bhavani comes over him, It is something impossible to visualize because it's not just the word and the image, but the state, emotional state that he creates. And that's why he says this mantra is born from the secret depths in the heart, but it is formed by the emotion, then it rises to the mind, and then it expresses itself in the form of word. Its root is here, it's the creative word. So from here it arises. That's why when people say Bhagwan, there was a little bhajan which in the childhood we used to sing. लोग कहते हैं भगवान आते नहीं, द्रौपदी की तरह तुम बुलाते नहीं. Now what is that द्रौपदी की तरह बुलाना? I said, what is there द्रौपदी? It's not about the words that she said. It's about the earth. From the heart it climbs. Ma, that carries weight. So this power which is there, the creator who resides in a heart, he has brought it out, held it in the heart, given it form, then it rises in the mind, and then it is expressed through speech. And here we have this description, what it does to us. It's an invitation to Sri Aurobindo's poems. As when the mantra sings in yoga's ear. It's not just reading a poem. It's the mantra sinking in a yoga's ear. Yoganishtha avastha. One is in a state where one wants the divine, some way or the other. As when the mantra sings in yoga's ear, its message enters, stirring the blind brain, and keeps in the dim, ignorant cells its sound. The hearer understands a form of words, and musing on the index thought it holds, he strives to read it with the laboring mind. How can we understand with the laboring mind what has not been born from the laboring mind? Revelation cannot be understood by the laboring mind. The mind has to be upgraded. That's what Sri Aurobindo is doing, is upgrading our software of the entire. And of course its impact on the body cells. Mother says that, mantra has this most powerful agency to act upon the body cells. But finds bright hints, not the embodied truth, then falling silent in himself to know, he meets the deeper listening of his soul. So when people say, Sri Aurobindo, padhne se neend aa jati hai, we feel asleep. Better to sleep reading Sri Aurobindo than to be awake with the television and the WhatsApp. Better to sleep reading Sri Aurobindo. If this could happen, much of our drug prescriptions will come down, Then, falling silent in himself to know, he meets the deeper listening of his soul. The soul of man is the hearer. It's not the ears, it's not the mind, it's not even the heart. The soul of man, it's a banquet on which it is the hearer. He meets the deeper listening of his soul. The word repeats itself in rhythmic chants. This is a medically proven thing, by the way. When we go and meet somebody, whatever we have spoken, even the smile we have made, it repeats itself in the brain. There are neurons in the brain which are called mirror neurons. So when we go and meet somebody, and if we momentarily say, maybe, now we have gone. But the mirror neurons are now repeating it. Anand Bhai reminded me the other day. So they keep repeating. Why did he say maybe? And they will, then all kinds of meanings will be derived. But if you say it's okay, see, old age doctors, when they didn't know much, they knew the thing to be known. Theek ho jayega. Now we know too much and we miss the one thing to be known, as Sri Aurobindo says. So he says, he meets the deeper listening of his soul. The word repeats itself in rhythmic strains. Thought, vision, feeling, sense, the body self. See, its effect is on everything. Thought, vision, feeling, sense, the body self are seized unutterably, and he endures an ecstasy and an immortal change. So what is the sign that we are understanding Sri Aurobindo? Is that we are enjoying Sri Aurobindo. If nothing else, looking at the book, I have seen just keeping the SABCL ad that connect with SABCL. Just, looking at it created such a joy. Just looking at the books. It used to feed, nourish. So, all these are seized are seized unutterably, and he endures an ecstasy and an immortal change. The change that he brings about cannot be undone. Whatever may happen, it remains inside as the solid bedrock of our existence. He feels a wideness, cure of narrowness. He feels a wideness and becomes a power. He's not saying that he has access to power or acquires something. He becomes a power. All knowledge rushes on him like a sea, because a door opens. Knowledge is all within. Knowledge is all above. But we live like closed containers, so we do not know, because we think what we see and hear is true. Mother says if you are living in that illusion, you are not even ready for the spiritual life. What we see and hear is not true. Truth is so deep inside. In fact, at one place he says, you are speaking about the supramental action. She says, my child, only that which goes on in the depths of the human heart is true. All the rest is artificial and false. So, all knowledge rushes on him like a sea, transmuted by the white spiritual ray. He walks in naked heavens of joy and calm. Heaven is created here. Heavens of joy and calm and splendors. Sees the God face and hears transcendent speech. So this is the transcendent speech to which the only way of expressing gratitude is to read it, to hold it inside, to reflect upon it, and most importantly, to live it. Thank you.
We now shift from poetry to Sri Aurobindo's literature to your own life.
குடியெல்லாம் நமனை என்றோ நரகத்தில் இடர்படோ குடியெல்லாம் நமனை என்றும் நரகத்தில் இடர்படோ ஏமாப்போம் பிரியறியோம் பணிவோம் அல்லோ இன்பமே என்னாலும் துன்பமே இல்லை இன்பமே என்னாலும் துன்பமே இல்லை காமாக்கும் குடியல்லா தன்மையான சங்கரன் நாமாக்கும் குடியெல்லாம் நமனை அன்றோ நாமாக்கும் குடியெல்லாம் நமனை என்றும் நரகத்தில் இடர்படோ ஏமாப்போம் பிரியறியோம் பணிவோம் அல்லோ இன்பமே என்னாலும் துன்பமே இல்லை தாமாக்கும் குடியல்லா தன்மையான சங்கரன் நல் சங்கவின் குறை போர்க்காரில் ஓமாக்கே நாம் என்றும் மீளாடா கொய்மலச்சேவடியினே குருகினோமே சிவா ஓம்.
Namaste to everyone. Well, in this year, the 150th birth anniversary of Sri Aurobindo, I have attended many a program, webinars and different kinds of programs. But I have never been to any of this Lit Fest, as it is popularly called. And I was a bit eager to see what's the meaning of this Lit Fest, what do they do about it in this festivals. But long back I had a talk with Lalit, that we should have a Pondicherry Lit Fest. And I think I'm happy that he finalized it. I couldn't do it from my side of Saka. So I'm happy, Lalit, that at least you have launched on that. So you have a beautiful Pondicherry Literature, Literature and Art Festival. And it's a fine balance, literature and art. But after all, they both represent the same deity, the same spirit of beauty and delight. Expressions are different, but the source is the same, delight. But when I started thinking about it, initially I gave Lalit the title Sri Aurobindo, the literary critic. But then I started thinking about it. I said, is Sri Aurobindo really a literary critic? We have seen, we have read, especially his great book, The Future Poetry. And his letters, and especially his letters at the end of Savitri. There are lots of guidelines given to literary critics and scholars of poetry. But then I said, we also call Sri Aurobindo a philosopher, which, as all of us know, is a misnomer. He himself didn't want to be called a philosopher. He said, philosophy? No, I'm not a philosopher at all. He denounced being a philosopher. And yet he said, what all he wrote down from his experiences, the spiritual yogic experience, the very fact he put it down in a logical, sequential, rational manner, it became his philosophy. So he's not a philosopher per se who creates a kind of a mental thought waves and ideas stitched together or put together. So I felt this is exactly the same thing that applies to Sri Aurobindo, the literary critic. He's not a critic per se. He is basically a poet. A poet which himself declared that I would like to be known as a poet and a politician. So he being a poet, what was his first understanding of poetry? Of course, in his great book, as I said, there is a very simple definition. He would write that to embellish with beauty is only the most outward function of art and poetry, which I'm sure our friend Lalit knows very well, because I can see all around embellished by beauty, art and poetry. But that is the lowest one, the outward function. More intimately beautiful and noble and great and full of meaning is its higher office. So now we are going into the higher level. It's not just beauty, but there should be a nobility, there is a greatness and full of meaning. It's not, painting or poetry for the heck of it. Just I have good language, I write a few lines. It's not that. It must lead you to a kind of a higher life. Even poetry, all these colors. Because somebody was yesterday, I think I was reading somewhere, said it's a kind of a reaction. And I said, let me do what I want to do. So I have the freedom to take a brush and do what I want. In fact, it's not me, it's the mother who was explaining. But some people take a brush and do anything they want, and they want to be recognized, they don't do the real work behind it. So Sri Aurobindo says there must be a full of meaning, that's the second level. Its highest comes when the poet becomes the seer and reveals to man is eternal life and the Godhead's of His manifestation. There comes Sri Aurobindo. So he's not just a poet in the usual common modern day language. For sure, we must always use the word kavi, nothing short of that. Because there is no word in English to say who is kavi. So I think henceforth all of us, especially Lalit in this lit fest, we must use the word Sri Aurobindo the kavi, no more Sri Aurobindo the poet. Although you don't understand, fine. Karma you don't understand, there is nothing called in English word called karma. So we have to create our vocabulary for Sri Aurobindo. Sri Aurobindo created vocabulary for us. We have to say Sri Aurobindo the kavi. Because that is the only Vedic terminology which applies to him. Because as I said here, his highest comes when the poet becomes the seer and reveals to man his eternal self. Who is the self? Who is the seer? Revealing to man his eternal self and the Godhead's of its manifestation. Wonderful. And this is exactly what he has done in his sonnets. And I'm not going to ask an embarrassing question, I'm sure all of you have read his sonnets. So that's where comes out the eternal self of Sri Aurobindo. And then in Savitri, he brings out the Godhead's of his manifestation. So we see both these aspects of the eternal self. Why I'm saying eternal self? Because that is the individual aspect of Sri Aurobindo. Sonnets are those individual personal realizations of Sri Aurobindo. That's the eternal self. And then when it comes to Savitri, there is the impersonal, universal, cosmic self, where there is the play of the Godheads and the divinity in different aspects, the transcendental, the universal, and the individual. So we have a beautiful combination here, sonnets and Savitri. And some of you may know the details. Both the greatest number of sonnets and Savitri were written simultaneously after 1935. Before 35, he has written some sonnets. It's not that they are good or bad. But this phase after 1935, you see some of those sonnets which these experiences have been almost transferred to Savitri. And in Savitri, you don't recognize Sri Aurobindo. You all say Sri Aurobindo has written Savitri, but when you read Savitri, it's a very Sri Aurobindo, not the individual Sri Aurobindo. It's too big. He's an Himalayan. You cannot see a Himalayan sitting on the ground. Whereas when you read the Savitri, you suddenly feel the Lord close by and then kind of whispering into your ears, beautiful rhythm of songs. So here I say now, this is the seer. And as himself says, it's written that this is the class of seers and we should think of poetry. See, that is his understanding of poetry. Is he a critic? For such a man, we just sit down and say, hey, what are the rules and principles and rhythm and all that? And he read his future poetry. I mean, it's so brilliant. And it's so brilliant, we can't even look at it. It's too bright for our eyes. We can't understand that. It's too beyond. Because it really goes back into the Vedic and the Persian style of poetry. And therefore we see that just as in philosophy, and when he was writing the Life Divine, when the mother asked him to put down his experiences, when he wanted to start the aria out of, he was a bit hesitant in the beginning. But mother says, hey, you have to put forward all that you have experienced. I am not asking you to create Life Divine or Vedas and the Upanishads and the Gita. She said, only put forward what you have done in a language understandable to the world. And Sri Aurobindo said, well, yes, being a yogi, I should be able to do all that. So it's more like a challenge of being a yogi, I should be able to do. And there he was. The cat just flew, and there were these beautiful aria articles. And similarly, for the poet, when he had conquered this kind of a poetry, all that goes with that pravaha, wherein this rhythm, what is rhythm, what is poetry? poetry, what is chanda, what is this words, what all we are getting to understand, the meaning of the word, all that is part of the rhythmic flow of the mantra. So it's not rationally sat down and said, hey, because we have so many critics in English literature, I don't want to take their name because, or I don't know if I remember any one of them, 40 years back I read some of them. So you see, those critics sat down and say, hey, what is poetry, what should be done? Here, the seer had to sit back and say, hey, what are the things that belong to this world of criticism? And therefore, first of all, I'd like to establish.
You have another 15 minutes.
I just gave an introduction. Well, I know, yeah, out of time. Well, see, Sri Aurobindo is not a thing to be spoken about, you have to prove with him. However, so that is the seer. But then, this seer also was prepared. That is the beauty of Sri Aurobindo's life. When you look back and look at his life, I see every step in his life has been ordained, preordained. Not by destiny, but by divinity. You see, why was he sent to India? You may say the circumstantial, all that explanation I know very well. I read many of the biographies. But it's not that his father was wanted and anti-Indian and all that is fine. But the divinity chose to send him there. Because there he was to be trained. His mind had to be trained. This entire Western philosophy, Western literature, Western view, Western understanding of life. And there he read Greek and Latin and all that, and the masterpieces of all this great literature. And what for? A man who had gathered into himself the best of the Western culture, literature, poetry, music, philosophy, everything. So that tomorrow, all that is cramped and digested and put forward in a new, heightened spiritual form in Savitri. Same thing happened as a philosopher. The same thing happened. He had all the greatest experiences of Nirvana, Shankaracharya, Nirguna Brahman and the Kali Rupa and all that. The greatest experiences that the Indian spirituality could give, he gathered all of them. It's only after he gathered all of them that he came to Pondicherry. Not before. So there's a meaning in all his steps. It's not just random, somebody said go to Pondicherry, the Lord said, why did Sri Krishna tell him to go to Pondicherry? Because he had amassed the wealth of spirituality that India could offer right from the very times of present times. And now Sri Krishna says, you have to go on a new path. For that, you go to Pondicherry. I have prepared a place for you. So there he comes, and then he goes now beyond all that India could offer as a spirituality. And then only he comes to the supramental. You see, this is the beauty as spiritual experience. He gathered the whole past and took it to the future when he comes to Pondicherry. As a man of literature, he gathered the whole of the West. Then he comes to his own poetry. There we see that he becomes a seer. So this is necessary to experience. But that is where, we see the genius. And in fact, here we had a poet, I can say, most of you know this, my Lalit knows him, Amal Kiran, who proved a lot into Sri Aurobindo's Savitri. And he was the fortunate fellow who saw for the first time what Sri Aurobindo that is secretly the Savitri. And Sri Aurobindo shares with Amal Kiran his first book 1, canto 1, a few lines, 35 lines, 36 lines. So in his probing, one day he asked Sri Aurobindo, who are your greatest poets in the world? And this is where I brought this note. Where Sri Aurobindo says, he picked up 11 of the greatest poets and he categorized them into 3 different levels. The first one, he says, is Valmiki, Vyasa, Homer, and Shakespeare. The top rung of poets of the world. And how could would you know them? If you had not been to England. You see all this Valmiki, Vyasa, Homer and Shakespeare. And then amongst them, Valmiki, number one. I mean, you should read his appreciation of Valmiki and Vyasa. The two greatest giants, and still he differentiates them and says what Valmiki and what is Vyasa. And of course, I wish I could go back to my MA days and start reading all this poetry and all those things. I lost a lot of time. But yet nothing is too late. Because this is so mesmerizing, this, of course, Homer and Shakespeare. Then second rank of people, but I can never imagine of reading them. Sophocles, Virgil, Milton, Goethe, Dante, Kalidasa and Racine. So the second level we have Kalidas. First level Valmiki and Vyasa. And so he says these are the ones. And at the third level he puts in some French poets. Mallarmé, Baudelaire, etc. So he says, but there's one warning he gives us. He says ultimately the indelible judgment comes only from the world and time. That means he says like Tagore has said about Vishwamanava. That means the world will judge who is the best poet, and that best poet must last through time. And Shakespeare and Valmiki and Vyasa, I'm sure they are given enough test in time to see they are the greatest ones. But here we see I'm just now looking at my watch and I'll take 2 minutes for each of 5 minutes. Sri Aurobindo's main contributions as a poet critic. You see, there are so many critical things and it's a beautiful thing. And I'm always telling my wife Dimshika that one day I will study the future poetry, That's my ambition, that's my prayer, that's my project. Because it's too good. I mean, sometimes even Savitri and librarian I can put aside and say, I'll take a future poetry. Now, because as women are prepared, now I'm prepared librarian and Savitri to go to the future poetry. That's the best preparation I've done, I think. However, so what are the best things he has given, the most important things? He has given us a category of the poetic styles. What are the different poetic styles? He calls them 3 levels of it. The adequate style, the dynamic style, not 3, there are 5 of them. And then he would call them as the element style. And then the 4th one is the inspired style. And the 5th one is the most inspired, inevitable inspiration. Now, why has he given those 5 categories? Well, later on, I don't have time to give you examples, but later on he will give us examples to show that there's a worldly treasure. There's so many, poets and novelists and writers and all of them. But the language itself falls into different degrees. And that kind of a language is not just a question of inspiring. There's so much of trash material, everywhere in the world, all the books. But he says, no. You must read those which are inspirational or this or that. Well, that leave it up there. Now, the second important contribution to Sri Aurobindo is the question of the classification of the different levels or sources of inspiration. This is something most unique. Nobody in the world has even touched that. Classification of the different sources of poetry. And this classification has been given purely because of his sadhana. Because Sri Aurobindo alone could have really given this classification where he said there are 3 levels, the occult, the psychical and the spiritual. There are 3 levels of this. But not poetry, remember, of the sources of inspiration. Because Sri Aurobindo looks at poetry as coming from different levels. In fact, in the future poetry, the most important idea in the future poetry is that, as he calls it here, I'll quote him, he says, poetry, like everything else, evolves. I mean, like we have yoga, all that is yoga. In literature, he says, poetry, like everything else, evolves. This is the mantra of future poetry. That why is it that it says even poetry also evolves? And that is what is beautiful about Sri Aurobindo, that the central thought, the central idea of Sri Aurobindo's philosophy, literature, or yoga, everything is the word evolution. Evolution and Sri Aurobindo are almost synonymous. Take up any of his book, there's only one word, evolution. Evolution of society, evolution of Vedas, evolution of Upanishads, evolution of Gita, evolution of poetry, evolution of everything. So he was the central figure promoting evolution. So he says, even poetry evolves. And to show that evolution in poetry, he took up the entire British poetry. And then right from Chaucer to Yeats, he makes a complete analysis to show us that how it had evolved from levels of consciousness after consciousness. And that's where we see a grand evolution. And there he comes to say, of course, he dealt only with these poets, where he called them the poets of dawn. That is where we have to go. From India, he has taken only Tagore, but from the poetry of dawn. So we see he has made a beautiful analysis in poetry of dawn, and then he says next level would have been spiritual poetry. But unfortunately, the world wars came, and the whole evolution of consciousness got jammed. There was a kind of a barrier that came, and the evolutionary trend changed. So in this poetic evolution, we see occult, psychical, and spiritual. And then he would say, in the spiritual thing also, there are 5 subcategories, which are poetic intelligence is the lowest one, illumined mind, higher mind, intuition, and overmind. You can see these are all yogic levels. In philosophy, we would call them levels of consciousness beyond mind. But this Sri Aurobindo brings down to say that these are not just beyond mind. Till now, the great poets, and then this is where he quotes in all the romantic poets, the literature poets, and great poets, the epical poets, to tell us that poets are those who have already connected with these levels. Not connected to the level of consciousness, please remember, there's a difference. Connected to the levels of consciousness only a yogi does. But these poets can get a glimpse, as many of these musicians have done. And Mother would have given lots of examples of musicians. So Sri Aurobindo and the Mother tell us that these levels have been available to the human poets, the human genius of poets, musicians, artists. But now, Sri Aurobindo says, humanity has to do the sadhana. Through sadhana, you can achieve each of those levels and bring down consciously that poetry of that level. And Savitri is that example. I mean, there is a kind of a meaning in the whole thing that Sri Aurobindo has done, as I've been telling you. Savitri has given us all these levels. Although he says all the time, he says, I go to the highest level, I try to bring down the best on the higher levels. But then one thing you must notice in Savitri, he has not rejected the lower levels. That is the beauty of Savitri. We should not think Savitri is only supermind, overmind. Not at all. Because even in this creation, what happens if there is a beautiful flower on the roadside? Do you think that only a lotus is important and a rose is important? But the grass flower is not important? That's also beautiful. It has its place in nature. So Sri Aurobindo says, even all these levels of consciousness, each one has its own place. So Savitri, if you can dig into that, make a research into that, you will see all these levels are beautifully exampled. Because there is a supermind, overmind is there. but the poetic intelligence, psychic intelligence, or occult poetry, all is there. That's why that is what I call always the magnificent summum bonum of all poetic literature, all poetic criticism. It's done it consciously, not just in a random way. So we would say that ultimately the highest category is that of the mantra in these categories, which will carry future poetry on 5 suns. This is something again, the third contribution I must say, apart from the levels of styles of poetry and then the levels of poetry. Future poetry, he said there will be 5 suns of poetry. What he calls 5 suns, truth, beauty, delight, life, and spirit. These are the 5 levels. And there's something, it belongs to a far off future. We have been doing things in the past till the overmental level. But the supramental level consciousness and poetry will bring in a new genre that will be manifesting truth, beauty, delight, life, and spirit. And that's the most unique contribution that I think Sri Aurobindo has made. I think as he has made dozens of unique contributions. How many do we count? So it is such a great, it's not a pleasure, it's a very small word. It's a great blessings that here is Sri Aurobindo who has revealed, he has opened us the doors of the future, be it poetry or Vedas or Upanishads or society or international politics, everywhere. And here we are sitting the seat of his tapasya, where he was here for 40 years. So it's not just a question of blessing, but in a way, if you waste this opportunity of reading him and understanding him, we are the persons, I would say, I'm sorry to say, we are the most cursed ones. Because, as I said, Diya Karni Chahiye Andhera, typically like that. So when I see and I really wish Lord to give me another 50 years of extension of my life only to read him. I have no other passion in life but to read him. There's so many discoveries, so many things he's telling us. So this year, 150th anniversary, as the mother said, he's spreading his consciousness. Let us be open to him and get whatever he gives us. That is his blessings and his boon for his 150th anniversary. As the mother told us in 72, he has come in a concrete manner. I'm sure he is here in the concrete manner. So this is what for me is Sri Aurobindo is here. Well, it's difficult to close my mouth, but Lalita is there. He's around by the other speakers beyond you, beside you. He gives you a chance. He'll have some other chance to speak. You speak of Sri Aurobindo poetry or Sri Aurobindo yoga, Sri Aurobindo philosophy, there's no end. You only shut your mouth and say, look at your words. Thank you everyone, our Sen Babu, Lalit Babu and all of you. Thanks a lot. And we'll get another chance. Thank you.
Very thank you how beautifully you have given us the essence of Sri Aurobindo's literature. Really grateful for sharing. I know you run one of the finest institutes called Sakar, which is the center of excellence and has done a lot of good work. Thank you for doing that for all of us. Thank you, Shikadi, for this beautiful gift and blessing that you have given in form of Sakar.